Here you can see the pattern. This is Brightly. It's beautiful. I love it. I've done it before in Christmas colors. The back shows you all the fabric sizes that you need for if you're doing a throw, a twin, a queen, a king. I am making a throw size. So the first thing you need to do is cut all your fabric. You can see on the table in front of me, I have already cut so many pieces and I've already made 2 blocks, one of the chain blocks and one of the star blocks. But I'm continuing to cut some more background fabric because you need to have everything pre-cut as you make the quilt. So you can kind of balance your colors and make sure you have everything where you want it to go. I clearly should have replaced my rotary blade before I started cutting because I had to cut that seam, had to cut that line like 2 or 3 times. So that means that my blade was not sharp and I probably should have changed it. Also, I ran out of room on my cutting board because I had already been cutting last night for quite a long time. And so now I'm switching to a smaller ruler to do the smaller cuts. You don't have to use a smaller ruler. You can keep using a larger ruler. But I like this particular ruler because it has a nice black 1/2 inch line. So if you're measuring things that need to be with a 1/2 inch, there's just a really nice marking on this one. I bought this particular ruler. It's a 5-inch square when I was doing a quilt that had a whole bunch of 1/2 square triangles that I needed to square up. And that's what I originally bought it for. But then I found out I like it for just regular cutting because the markings are super clear. I think it's a Creative Grids. I'll try to link it in the description, but this is one of my favorite, this little square ruler. It's just easy to manipulate. So when you're doing your other cuts, it's just very easy. All the cutting instructions are in the pattern. So you can buy the pattern like how I bought it straight from Cluck Cluck Sew's website. And it comes beautifully, full color, almost like a laminated cardstock, which is great because it holds up well. And or it's also available, I believe, as a PDF download. So if you want to just immediately download it to your computer and start, I believe the pattern is also available that way. So here I am finishing up my cutting. Once you have finished all of your cutting, the next thing that you're going to need to do for making a star block is pick 8 of your small squares. Again, the measurements are in the pattern. Pick 8 of your small squares. Here I'm counting out 8 of them. These are going to be the points of your star block. I'm back and I found a pencil. And I also realized I left my rotary blade open, which is a big no-no for safety because you can cut yourself. So I closed up my rotary blade. Now, what I needed the pencil for was each of your little blocks that's going to be a star point needs a diagonal line. Now, you can get diagonal seam tape for your machine. There's different methods. We're going to do something called snowballing a corner. The most precise way that I have found to get a more consistent block is to take the time, take a pencil, and lightly draw a diagonal line from one point to one point on your square. So from corner to corner on your square, draw a diagonal line. This is going to be for snowballing your corners. So that's what I needed the pencil for. Okay, when you finished marking your diagonal line on the back of your 8 small squares, you're next going to pick, or you may have already picked, the rest of the fabrics that are going to make your star block. So you need a center accent fabric. In the example at the top of my board, you can see I used a little owl, and that's the center of my star block. Here I'm going to use this royal blue with snowflakes. It has little metallic silver snowflakes, and that's going to be the center of my block. You also are going to need, I'm making room on my board here, you're going to need 4 background squares of their larger squares. You're going to need 4 background rectangles, and you're going to need 4 background small squares. So here I am just starting to lay out my block to see where each of my fabrics are going to go. You also are going to need 4 small squares of accent fabric. These are going to be the corners of your star block, and they're going to become part of the chain when you put your quilt together, because this quilt alternates star blocks and a chaining block, and that's what's going to make the diagonal chain rows across the whole thing. So you need 4 solid colors. The squares that we put the diagonal lines on, you're going to I'm just kind of trying to see how it's going to go, but they're going to be on the side of each of your large background squares. So I'm putting them on the corners here. You're going to end up with 2 on each of those, but I'm just putting 1 down right now. I'm continuing to lay out all of my fabrics that are going to be in this block. I have my background rectangles, I have my background small squares, and then I'm going to need the 4 solid accent colors for the corners of the block. You can do this all different ways. I like to get every single thing that I need for a single block and go 1 block at a time. And then when I finish that block, I'm happy. And then if I have to leave and not touch it again for a day or 2, that's okay because I've at least finished an entire block. And so here I am. I'm just choosing which blues I want. There's really no right or wrong. I try to get a mix of darker and lighter values in each block. The next thing you're going to do is, it's hard to see, but this is where I've drawn the diagonal line with the pencil. You're going to sew directly along that diagonal line. Now your fabric should be pretty side to pretty side, meaning sometimes the patterns will say right sides together, but basically you're going to have the back side of your little square facing up. The pretty side of the fabric is down. And you're going to sew along that diagonal line that we drew earlier. This technique is called snowballing the corners. When you learn how to snowball a corner, it will open up so many more patterns for you because this is a very common technique that is used. It's part of how you make flying geese. It's part of how you make different half square triangles. There's so many different things that are used with a snowballed corner. You're going to repeat this 4 times because you have 4 background squares. What you're doing right now is creating your star legs. The next part of this block is to sew the small background square to your small accent fabric square. And you're going to repeat this 4 times. It is now time to press what you have already done. You should have 4 blocks that are the background square to an accent color square. You're going to iron to press the seam, open it up. You're going to press each of these to the dark side, away from the background. The pattern has pressing instructions. If you follow the pressing instructions in the pattern, your seams will nest and your blocks will nest, which will allow you to get more precise blocks. So I'm pressing each block using a little bit of steam. Now I am ready to press my first snowball block. I'm going to iron it first to press the seam. Now I'm going to fold it the corner to the corner. I'm going to iron it towards that corner, so it should end up making a square. Here you can see I have folded it back. You can see the pretty color of the fabric. I'm just pressing it with a block to help it get nice and flat. Later, we're going to trim the back of it, but I need to iron all 4 of them. So you're going to press your seam to set your seam, pull the corner to the corner, smooth it with your hand, add a little heat, add a little steam, get your block nice and flat. You're going to do this with all 4 of your star leg blocks. The next thing that you need to do is trim off the excess fabric. So this is just a good sharp pair of scissors. You're going to trim a 1/4 inch away from your seam line to remove the bulk, because right now there's 3 layers of fabric there from your square and then you're folded over. So lift up the top layer and then about a 1/4 inch away, just kind of eyeball it, trim off the excess fabric from that corner. Again, you're going to repeat this 4 times. Okay, your block probably looks a little funny right now because you only have 1 star leg on. That's okay. You're going to repeat the process we did earlier to add another corner. You're going to take one of those small squares that you drew a diagonal line on, add it to the other corner, sew on the line. You're going to iron that back. Here, I'm just showing you. You're going to sew right along that line from corner to corner. You're going to repeat this 4 times so that you can go ahead and make your other star leg. Take your little square, line it up on the corner. You do want to take a second here to try to be precise, because the better your star points are, your block is just going to have a crisper look. In the end, when it does it matter that much? No, because your quilt's going to get washed, it's going to get cuddled, it's going to be beautiful, your fabrics are beautiful, but you know, just taking a little bit of time to be careful here, it will impact your final look. After you've finished all 4 of your star leg blocks and you've snowballed all 8 of those corners, you are so close to being done. This last part is so easy. At this point, I feel like the last part of the block just flies. You're going to take your background rectangle and one of those little units that you used earlier. The key here is I always lay the block back out to make sure that I'm putting this together correctly, because it does matter, because you want a dark square in each of the outer corners. And so just take a second to line it up, pretty side to pretty side, right sides together, 1/4 inch seam down the side. You're going to do this 4 times. This part goes so much faster than the star legs. The star legs are not difficult. Snowballing the corners are not difficult, but this part is just even easier and faster. And so you're going to do this 4 times. When you take these over to the ironing board, you're going to iron them towards the smaller squares that have the dark fabric. In general, when you're quilting, you can either press your seams open, or the pattern may tell you which way to press your seams. A good rule of thumb is to press towards the darker fabric. Sometimes the pattern will tell you something different, but a general rule of thumb is to press towards the dark side of the fabric. This is the part where I start getting really excited, because all of my blocks are done. I'm now going to have 9 blocks that I'm going to sew together into a 9 patch. I just need to iron these, so at this point I'm getting very excited. The block is getting so close to being done. I'm about to be able to see the results of what I did. I'm trimming everything apart. I had done something called chain piecing, which is where you just keep running the next block under, and so when you get over to your ironing board, you're going to have a whole string of blocks together, so you're going to cut those apart. I am going to start here by ironing these blocks open. This is my star leg block. Again, press your seam, fold the corner to the corner, make sure it's nice and flat. You can apply a little steam. I like to put a block on it. I believe these are called tailor's clappers, but my dad had made me a giant set of Jenga blocks, so I just stole one of the giant Jenga blocks, and it's nice and smooth. My dad had sanded all of them, and it just works perfect for, apparently, what happens with a clapper is the wood absorbs some of the heat and steam, and then the weight of the block itself helps keep everything super flat. Is this necessary? No. Does it make it flatter? Yes. And in quilting, the flatter your block can be, it's easier later when you make your quilt sandwich. So if you have a piece of wood laying around and it's a clean piece of wood and it's been sanded, throw it on there. See what happens. That's all I did, and I do think it makes a better block. They also sell really cute tailor's clappers, but I didn't buy anything. I just looked for something that I had in the house. When you're pressing these little blocks, this is what I was talking about earlier, you're going to press these square blocks towards your little squares. So one side is a background rectangle and one side is your little squares. Press it towards your squares. And I'm just stacking everything up and putting my little block of wood on top of there. Again, just to help absorb some of the heat and steam and to make my seams really nice and flat. Okay, we are getting so close. I'm going to come back over to the table. We're going to lay our block out and we're going to see how it looks. You do need to trim the excess fabric off of your second star leg. So just take your sharp scissors and fold that corner back and trim off the excess from behind your seam. So you're trimming off 2 layers of fabric. There's 3 layers of fabric on that corner. You're going to trim off the bottom 2 so that you leave just your top part of your snowball. This is one of the most fun parts to me, is that now that you've finished making all of your star legs, you're going to lay your block back out, and it is at this point that you can start to see what it's going to actually look like. I just always start to really feel motivation to keep going at this point because all the work you've done up till now is paying off, and you can see what your finished product is going to look like. Now you're just going to sew these rows together. Each block is going, I just fold it over and then I immediately sew it, and I'm going to do that. There is a little tricky part with these corners. You want to make sure that you're not going to cut off your star point. So here on the back of this, there's a little tiny intersection there. You want to make sure that your needle stays to the right of that intersection. If you sew too far past it, you're going to cut off your star point. And again, it's going to be fine if you do, but your block will look a little better if you stay to the right of that seam intersection. 1/4 inch seams. Next, I'm going to open these up and we are going to see what these look like. Now, the pressing instructions tell you to press it towards the star leg. So I'm just finger pressing here. I'm laying it back where it goes. This is to make sure that I don't put the block together wrong. The seam ripper is your friend. If you put a block together wrong, it's not the end of the world. You can seam rip that out and put it back together correct, and your fabric is going to be fine. I've had to seam rip many blocks, and it's going to be fine. But I do try to take time here. I'm just finger pressing it towards the star legs. I'm showing you here that the seam went right to that corner of the star legs. So when you open it up, you have a nice point. And you haven't lost any of your crispness there. So finger pressing it towards the star legs. Later, I will take it to the iron and actually press it, but I'm just finger pressing it right now. That's the block. I'm going to add my other squares on. So I'm just turning it over, lining it up, and I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch seam. The reason that I flipped it over is the seam allowance on the back. I find it easier if I'm going in the same direction as it. If I'm going the opposite direction, sometimes it gets a little caught up in the feed dogs. I like to have the star legs on top so that I can make sure that I am staying to the right of that intersection of the seams. 1/4 inch seam. One more to go. This block is almost done. Here I am ironing, and again, The pattern instructions tell you to iron everything towards your star legs. This is going to make it nest. So I do recommend pressing it according to the pattern instructions so that later your seams will nest. We now get to see our final block. So we're going to lay our rows back out, and all we have to do is sew these 3 rows together. Now, if you pressed it towards the star legs, your seams will nest. So all I'm doing here is making sure my seams are nesting, and I am going to add a clip at each of these intersections. So I nested the seams with my fingers, and I'm going to put a small clip, and then I'm going to sew the seam. This is to ensure that the finished product looks more accurate. Again, you're just going to run down with a 1/4 inch seam along the side. I get pretty close to my clips and then I pull them out, and then I still am trying to keep my finger there to make sure that that intersection is as accurate as I can get it. It's never going to be 1000% perfect. I'm checking my corners here, and just the feed dogs are going to pull your fabric through. Your hands are just to guide it to try to keep it as accurate as possible. I'm going to remove this one. I'm going to open it up with my fingers. Now, the pressing instructions say to press it towards your center row. So I'm using my fingers here to I'm going to take it later to the ironing board, but I'm just going to finger press for right now. Now I'm going to add that last top row on, right sides together. Again, I'm using my fingers to nest the seams, and I'm going to put a clip at each of those intersections. The seams nest really nicely. If you follow the pressing instructions, Cluck Cluck Sew, she does a great job of giving you instructions on which way to press. So I definitely recommend keeping your pattern out and pressing the way she tells you to press. Your blocks will nest beautifully. Again, I'm just taking my time. I get pretty close to my clip before I pull it out. Some people prefer using pins, but I hate getting stuck with pins, and so I much prefer these little clips. Okay, we're about to see the final reveal. I'm cutting off my little leaders and enders. Okay, let's open it up. Oh, I pressed it the wrong way. Turning it over, pressing it towards the center row. Look at that. We have a star block. Oh, it's so exciting. I hope you make this pattern. I hope you love this pattern.